Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Let's Play Warframe. I'm your host with the most, as always, Francois878. And today we are going to be talking about the newest fairy-themed frame to be released into Warframe. The only fairy-themed frame, to be fair. I guess there's Oberon. Whatever. This frame was released in the Silver Grove update. Her name is Titania, and she's alright. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm fairly lukewarm towards her. I think that a lot of her abilities are hard to manage while also playing the game, or her abilities are just flat out not very fun to use, or not very good for certain situations, or for panicky situations, or the list goes on and on. Some of her abilities are even done better by other frames, which is ironic considering the Oberon situation. But her base stats, we'll talk about that very briefly. Her base health is 100, her base shields are 100, her base energy is 100, and her base armor is 65. So she's fairly well balanced. Unfortunately, with her base energy only being 100, it can hinder certain builds. Because there are builds for Titania that require you to be casting abilities almost constantly. I hate to say this, but primed flow is sort of necessary on Titania, and I'm not a big fan of primed abilities being mandatory on any frame. But if you want to build her in a certain way, or to focus on certain abilities, I would recommend it. Her other stats are decent, well-balanced. Her survivability is sort of low, sort of in tune with other pseudo-caster frames, but her ultimate does grant her 50% damage, 50% dodge chance against enemies' attacks, so that can help her quite a bit. Now, her abilities are going to be as follows: Spellbind, Tribute, Lantern, and Razor Wing. Her kit is fairly well balanced, I think. You got crowd control, some damage, as well as very interesting buff abilities. The problem that I have is that a lot of these abilities, like I said, are either hard to manage or are kind of wonky, and I'll get to that shortly as we go through the list. Spellbind is her first ability. Basically, wherever the reticle is pointing when you cast this ability, a cloud of dust will spawn. Any enemy inside of the range of the dust cloud will be ragdolled, popped into the air. They will drop their weapons, and they will be like that for the full duration of the ability. Any allies in the dust cloud will be granted status effect immunity for the duration. Now, the problem with this ability is that the dust cloud area of effect is very small. At maximum range, you're looking at maybe 14 meters with overextended and stretch. So it's not going to be, you're not going to get that area of effect like you would with Sonic Boom or Pull, which are other really awesome panic crowd control abilities that are kind of in the same vein. Also, if you're trying to use this ability in a hurry and the reticle happens to not be pointed exactly where you want that dust cloud to go, you may launch that dust cloud clear out of range from what you want to hit. So it has a lot of potential to hurt you, basically, to not do what you want it to do. Granted, that just means you kind of have to be a little bit more careful, but that also means it's not as good of a panic crowd control ability. It's certainly not bad if you have time to use it properly and are encountering a large group of enemies. Spellbind is great. It can suspend 6 to 10 enemies in the air easily, and for the full duration of the ability, they'll be up there for for 20 seconds or more. So it's not a bad crowd control ability. I was expecting more of a cone and more of a panic-based crowd control ability. Unfortunately, also with the ally status effect immunity buff, because the the dust cloud range is so low, you will have to probably cast this ability multiple times unless your team is ultra well coordinated. It isn't likely that you'll be able to keep this ability. It won't be likely that you will only be able to cast this ability once and grant everyone on your team. You're more than likely going to have to cast it on everyone as they're playing. Now, her second ability is Tribute. This particular ability, basically, you hit an enemy with Tribute. They will be dealt damage as well as a damage reduction debuff if they survive, and it will create a shadow clone of that enemy. You walk over, you pick up that shadow clone, it will give you a buff, and there are 4 different buffs, and depending on what type of enemy that you hit, you will either get the dust buff, which is an enemy accuracy debuff. You will get Thorns, which is damage reduction for you and your teammates. You will get Entangle, which is enemy speed debuff, or Full Moon, which is you and your allies' companions get a damage buff. Now, the problem with Tribute is that you can't really very well build for Tribute. Power duration, power strength, and power range mods don't actually affect anything with the buffs themselves. Power range obviously affects how far away you can cast Tribute. Power strength and power duration affect the strength and the duration of the debuff that the enemy that you hit with Tribute will suffer. But the duration of the buffs, the range in which the buffs are applied to either you or your allies or your enemies, and the duration of the buffs are all flat values that can not be manipulated with mods, which makes Tribute difficult to build for. Really, efficiency is the only thing you can absolutely build for when it comes to Tribute, and if you're going to want to build Titania around Tribute, you're going to have to go with maximum efficiency, because you have to cast Tribute 5 times to get the maximum buff value for each of the different buffs. If you want the maximum accuracy, enemy accuracy debuff for Dust, which is 50%, you have to cast Tribute on 5 of the correct enemies to get that 50%. It's in 10% increments. So it's a lot to micromanage, and it really takes the whole... It takes you out of the game a little bit, because there's a ton of different stuff going on, and to watch those timers and to... It's a lot to micromanage, and I feel like this ability would benefit a lot from being able to be affected by power strength mods, duration mods, range mods. I think that would be... this ability might be a little OP after that, but they could tweak the base values so that it wouldn't be so bad. But it's it's just a tough ability. I was really excited for Tribute, and when I actually did some research and started reading about it, it's just a real, not the most fun ability I think they could have crafted, or the way they implemented it could have been better. Lantern is her third ability. Basically, you cast Lantern on an enemy. That enemy becomes a Lantern. All enemies within line of sight and range of the Lantern will slowly move towards the Lantern, and any enemy close enough to the Lantern will suffer small amounts of damage from Titania's butterflies. And when the duration finishes, or when you hit the 3 key again, the Lantern will explode, dealing damage to any enemy in range. Now, my initial thought for Lantern was that it was going to be a CC ability. Unfortunately, when you hit an enemy with Lantern, they just kind of float away sometimes, totally uselessly. And and they can just land in a corner where there are no enemies, therefore no enemies are CC'd. It's a much more interesting ability when combined with other Frame's abilities. You can use Vauban's Vortex to keep the lantern where you want it. You can also use Radial Disarm from Loki in order to draw enemies, because enemies will be forced to melee. You will draw enemies more quickly to the line of sight of the lantern, but again, there are other frames that can do a similar sort of synergy, so it's just tough to really be excited about Lantern when there are other frames that can pull off the same sort of vortex decoy combo. Her final ability is Razor Wing, the ability that I was honestly the most excited about, especially after they buffed the speed of the mode. It's just a lot of fun. It's Arc Wing in a regular mission, tearing through enemies. There's really nothing wrong with it, honestly. It's just a lot of fun. The melee does still feel a little weak to me, but it's not bad. It's not bad. It's it's a lot of fun. I'll be honest with you guys. But that's pretty much my review of Titania. If you guys want my recommendation on how to build her, go Razor Wing. Don't mess around with her other abilities. Go pure power strength. But thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you next time.